According to an account of that encounter, the first Japanese to arrive at the remote cove in which the ship had come to rest were peasants from a nearby village, who were intensely curious about the stranded Europeans. With no shared spoken language, the captain of the Chinese ship and the leader of the local Japanese village conversed using Chinese characters drawn into the sand of the beach, using sticks. Through this medium, the captain was questioned about the strange, white-skinned men with bizarre clothes and unfamiliar facial features who were among his crew. Just as exotic and fascinating were the objects the Europeans carried. The local lord, Tanegashima Tokitaka, met with the men from Portugal soon afterwards, and, after an impromptu demonstration, purchased 2 arquebuses, an early form of matchlock musket. Tokitaka gave these weapons to a master swordsmith named Yasuita Kinbei Kiyosada, who began work replicating the weapons, thus beginning the introduction of firearms into Japan. The muskets the Japanese blacksmiths devised were called Tanegashima after their place of introduction. The following year more Portuguese arrived, this time in their own vessels, and the men who had been driven on to Tanegashima Island were reunited with their countrymen. Rapidly, as further ships arrived and goods traded and exchanged, the two parties began to learn more of one another. Marco Polo had described Japan in his accounts as an island of gold, and in late Renaissance Europe, Japan was recognized as the most distant of all known civilizations. What was clear to the Portuguese traders was that in Japan, as in most of Asia, they simply did not have the option of behaving aggressively, as the Spanish had in Mexico and the Caribbean. 16th century Japan was a demographic superpower, with a population probably in excess of 12 million, many times the size of Portugal herself, and far larger than most European states. She was wealthy, highly organized, and militarily formidable. The Japanese emperor was little more than a symbolic, ceremonial figure, and so the nation was divided between numerous competing local rulers, the daimyo. Despite being in a phase of internal strife and warfare, 16th century Japan displayed none of the fragilities that had left Moctezuma's Mexico so vulnerable to Cortés. The pattern of conquest and domination that characterized Europe's contact with the civilizations of the Americas was not to be repeated in Asia, and the encounter between Japan and Europe was one the historian Holden Ferber described as the Age of Partnership, an era of collaboration and interaction that has defined relationships between Asians and Europeans through to the early modern era. Trade was the only option available to the Europeans who came to Japan, and the attractions of such a trade were obvious and multiple. The Japanese themselves produced numerous products that were desired both in Europe and in other parts of Asia, where the Portuguese also had trading bases. But more significantly, they had the wealth to buy large quantities of the goods that Europeans were seeking to sell. Their wealth was in the form of silver. After Spain, with its recently acquired territories in Mexico and Peru, Japan was the biggest producer of silver in the world. By the start of the 17th century, perhaps as much as a third of the world's silver was mined in Japan. This precious metal was the commodity Europeans needed more than any other in order to trade with China, during an age economic historians call the Silver Century. Indeed, the interconnections and globalism of the early modern age can be partly understood through the global flows of silver. The bulk of that precious metal, whether mined in the New World or extracted from the volcanic rocks of Japan, was exported to China and used to purchase Chinese commodities. China was in many ways the center of the first age of globalization. Her share of the global population in the 16th century stood at around 25%, a greater proportion than today, and she produced many of the most treasured commodities of the age: silks, fine porcelain, pearls, and lacquerware. The trade that developed between the Portuguese and the Japanese was in large part a Chinese trade.
To keep listening to this audiobook for free, click the link in the description. It will take you to a free Audible trial where you can listen to this and many other books for free for 30 days.